Please welcome to this live webcast on the subject of industry partnership between Swedish research company Diamyd Medical and American patient organization JDRF. Participating in this presentation or discussion is President and CEO of Diamyd Medical, Mr. Ulf Hannelius. We have Mr. Josh Vieth, who is Director of Research at JDRF, and also Mr. Mark Atkinson, who is a Director for the University of Florida Diabetes Institute and also a member of the board at Diamyd Medical. So, Ulf, what will we cover today?
Today we will cover, like you mentioned, the industry partnership between Diamyd Medical and JDRF that we announced in April this year. So we will both get an introduction to who JDRF is by Josh, and then we will discuss a bit about the trial, what has led to the trial, and then Professor Atkinson, he will talk about the type 1 diabetes landscape and what's happening and how our type of treatment fits in within this landscape, and we will have a discussion around this as well. So it will hopefully be a very, very interesting discussion on webcast, and I'm very honored to have with me two very eminent guests like Mr. Vieth and Mr. Atkinson. So,
yes, thank you, Ulf. So to start off, I turn to Josh. Could you please give us a short introduction to yourself and to JDRF? Why do you specifically? How do you support type 1 diabetes research?
Most certainly. Thank you, first of all, for having us. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Josh Vieth, and I'm Director of Research here at JDRF, and I'm primarily responsible for our disease-modifying therapy portfolio, which I'll be talking about. If you want to understand JDRF, you have to understand that while we are the largest funder of type 1 diabetes research, the largest funder solely focused on type 1 diabetes research, we're first and foremost a patient advocacy organization. We're proud to have been a part of every major advancement in T1D research or type 1 diabetes research in the past 50 years. And all of this to serve our mission, and that is to improve the lives today and tomorrow by accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and treat type 1 diabetes and its complications. And how I can do that, I can show you in our next slide. Our approach is really harnessing the strength of research, of advocacy, and of community engagement. And all of this together enables us to accelerate work across what we call the pipeline, getting research from the bench into patients' hands and into the clinic. And we're involved in every step of the pipeline. We have teams of people overseeing the progress at each stage. We start with discovery research, the discoveries that are made in the laboratory, and we work to fund this research, to advocate for funding from other organizations, and to advance clinical trials for translational development. We also have an entire team that works for regulatory approval, so we improve the prospects for having drugs approved to go on the market. We work with payers to increase coverage, affordability, and choice. And finally, a major portion of this is education. We have to support continuing healthcare provider education so that clinicians are aware of the latest therapies available for patients, and we also educate the community on the use of these therapies and what's available to them. All of this hopefully leading to better outcomes and then going through the pipeline again to cycle the next generation of therapies. On the next slide, I'll talk through a few of JDRF's research priorities, and these can be broken down really into 5 areas. The first is global universal screening or screening, and the goal here is to fund research and to promote research that identifies patients early before insulin dependency. And screening is a critical component of everything else we do because we need more screening to better understand the mechanisms of disease and to identify the patients that can benefit most from the therapies that we're pushing forward. We also have research into disease-modifying therapies. And the goal of this program is to accelerate the development of products that can slow, halt, or reverse type 1 diabetes at any age or any stage of disease. We have the cell therapies program, which accelerates the development of beta cell or islet cell replacement products, and with the goal of restoring insulin independence in patients that have been diagnosed with T1D. Under Improving Lives, we work on a number of areas to help those who are living with type 1 diabetes. This can be anything from developing better devices to smart insulins, adjunctive therapies, or dealing with the complications that are related to disease. And finally, training. I spoke a little bit in the previous slide about our education and outreach, but we also want to identify the best and brightest scientists and bring them into the T1D research community. On the next slide, I'll just go a little bit further into disease-modifying therapies. These, like I said, are the therapies that are aimed at delaying, stopping, or reversing type 1 diabetes at any age or stage of disease. And we know that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks the insulin-producing beta cells. This results in fewer and fewer beta cells and less insulin as time goes along. Therefore, the focus of this program is really twofold. One, we want to address the beta cells. We want to find ways to decrease the stress on them. We want to increase their survival, and we want to work on ways to regenerate functional beta cell mass. On the other side, we also want to address the immune system and stop that autoimmune attack. And we do this a number of ways and through a number of strategies, including stopping the cells that are actually carrying out the attack, enhancing the regulatory mechanisms within a patient so that they can control that autoimmunity, and overall decreasing the inflammation in the pancreas and surrounding area. And the reason I talk specifically about this program is specifically where the Diamyd 3 trial sits in our portfolio and why we're so excited to work with Diamyd. Thank you.
So much, Josh. I have another question for you. I know that you at JDRF, you choose your partners after a thorough due diligence process. What do you specifically value in the phase 3 study, Diamyd 3?
Most certainly. As I said before, the goal of particularly the disease-modifying therapy program is to accelerate the development of products that can slow, halt, or reverse disease at any stage. Some specific barriers in this development include really a lack of moving trials from proof of concept to pivotal trials or registrational trials, with the lone success story being currently the PROTECT and study, and really there's no therapy right now approved for stage 3 disease or new onset. There's been limited success in the testing of antigen-based therapies or tolerizing therapies once they've gone to the clinic. And one of the things we've known from a number of immunotherapy trials is that there are clear responders and non-responders, indicating a need to identify the factors that designate whether a patient is going to respond to a particular immunotherapy or another. So how this relates to our excitement around Diamyd and why we chose to move forward with this partnership is that it really is a critical component of our push to facilitate the development of these disease-modifying therapies. We're excited in the strong preservation of C-peptide that was observed compared to placebo in patients with the DR3-DQ2 haplotype in the phase 1 and 2 studies. This is the first phase 3 trial based upon meta-analysis of previous studies to assess the actual responder types and to identify the appropriate patient population for the best therapeutic benefit. And we see that as a real step forward for the field overall. And finally, this antigen-specific approach speaks to our priority of rebalancing the immune system or enhancing the regulatory mechanisms to allow that diminishing or that removal of the autoimmune attack. Overall, we're very excited to be working with Diamyd on this project, and we see it as an important additional phase 3 trial in the space.
And if I turn to Ulf and maybe Mark and ask, what are the crucial events and discoveries that led up to the design and the launch of this trial with the anti-gene specific immunotherapy Diamyd?
Yeah, so I can start, and I think a bit what Josh already highlighted is that we've been able, with quite a lot of clinical data, I mean, based on past trials, to really identify the responders based on the genetic profile of the patient, which is, in my mind, quite a major discovery, which is completely crucial and central for us as a company, and it could be very important for the field as a whole and other complex diseases, how you really, the HLA is quite a central component in how the immune system reacts to both foreign particles and endogenous substances. But I think what really has led up to this is, first of all, years and years of clinical trials, which is important. I mean, without all those data that have been collected through all these years, we wouldn't have been able to identify the responders. So that's very crucial. And I would say another very crucial, component here is to have the ability to work with so many great minds in this field. So it's not only us as a company who has done I would say it's all the investigators and all the patients who have been part of all these trials, but it's really that with the data and when the field starts to understand that not only that HLA, which is this is the main genetic risk factor for type 1 diabetes, it's not only a risk factor, it seems to have quite a crucial role in also how it guides autoimmunity in these patients. So depending on your genetics, you might have a different, what we call endotype. And we've then discovered if you treat with an endogenous substance like GAD, which is one of the components that the immune system reacts to in type 1 diabetes, then you should treat the individuals who have the right genetics that identify that protein in the right way, and then we inject with the same protein, and then magic happens. So that's really, so there's a lot of clinical trials that have led to where we are today, and that's why we feel very excited and quite very comfortable in the clinical trial design.
Did you have anything to add there, Mark? And you could get the opportunity to introduce yourself.
No, I think Josh and Ulf have summarized things well. I guess I'll just add with one word of introduction. I'm in my 40th year of type 1 diabetes research, and when I began these efforts, we were trying to essentially do what Josh described on one of his slides, to screen to identify patients or individuals at risk for type 1 diabetes. And the actual origins of GAD began in the late 1980s, early 1990s, where it was discovered as being one of these antigens in type 1 diabetes. And for a season, that's what its role was thought to be. It could be used as a way to screen for people with diabetes by looking at autoantibodies against it. But then over time, as Ulf indicated, studies began to show that the molecule GAD might have a central, if not key, role in type 1 diabetes development. It is the target of T cells, as Josh mentioned, in the autoimmune response, but also, as Ulf mentioned, countless investigators have shown its therapeutic applications both in mouse models of the disease as well as in human clinical trials. So GAD is an interesting molecule, both as a screening target, as a role in the disease pathogenesis, and then as a therapeutic target.
All right. Did you have anything to add to this?
No, I think that was a perfect introduction.
So how does Diamyd position itself in the therapeutic landscape?
Yeah, and I think regarding that question, I think we should go to Mark has some slides that actually summarizes a quite interesting commentary paper that was published in Lancet Endocrinology recently. So I think we should hand over to Mark and your slides as well. I can advance them here. Please,
Thank
Mark.
You. Thank you, Ulf. Yes, I had the honor of a couple weeks ago publishing this article in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology that everybody that's on a co-author of the list here, if I added up the years that they've been like myself in type 1 diabetes research, I'm sure it would be a combined 150 or more years of research experience. And what we felt like after looking where we are in type 1 diabetes now, it's time to make, for our field that is trying either delay type 1 diabetes onset or preserve insulin production in those recently onset with the disease, we need to take a pause and readdress and have an honest look at how we perform trials. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And right now, I made this quote a while ago. It's never good to have type 1 diabetes, but if you had to have it, now was the time. in terms of the disease history. Thanks in large part to efforts of the JDRF and industry, disease management tools in terms of allowing for continuous glucose monitoring, insulin pumps, new insulin analogs, and as also was mentioned, insurance programs. There's been a lot of improvements, but still it's a disease that we need a way to prevent or cure. And right now, again, we're in a pivotal time, as I mentioned, because actually in the last couple of years, there has been the identification of multiple drugs that seem to have a benefit in recent onset individuals. But as Josh mentioned, not everybody responds, and we need to do a better job in this population of understanding who might benefit or who's going through a clinical trial where there's little chance of them seeing benefit from going into a trial. And the other thing is of this list that we gave in the article of agents that show benefit, most of them are not specific for type 1 diabetes, or I should say the autoimmune, it's not specific for the autoimmune attack in type 1 diabetes. They'll target varying levels of the immune system that are not, again, not specific for type 1 diabetes. So you're having benefit, but you're essentially attacking the whole immune response, and that has challenges. And then some of these agents, and again, this is great research. This is advanced that JDRF has been working for many years to try and see. But some of these agents, they have issues of what I call pragmatism. So, for example, you would have to treat every 2 weeks for 26 weeks, or every 2 weeks for up to a year, or possibly just continually, and that in order to see some sort of benefit. And that's a challenge. Also, some of these drugs, once you provide them, even though they may be beneficial, if they have challenges in terms of retreating with the same drug, because it can cause problems both down the road if you need further treatments. And some of them, it may be even beneficial if you combine them, but if one drug has an impact on the immune response, if you start combining them, you have additional questions of safety and benefit, which go down to the bottom issue is that there are patients, when they're faced, it's a shock often when they're recently diagnosed with the disease, and then now you're coming in and saying that you could use this drug. And it forms a challenge when people will go on the internet and explore, and then they see some of the side effects that are common to these drugs, and then they have to weigh the benefit of that, versus just continuing on with managing diabetes. So these are some of the challenges that we put in the article. But if I could go to the next slide, we do believe that there are some solutions, and these were all quoted in the article, and one is, again, as a notion that both Josh and Ulf mentioned, precision-based medicine approaches, meaning identifying patients that are most likely to benefit from a given treatment. And I think Diamyd is, if not first in class, one of the first drug trials and therapeutics to try and utilize this, meaning by selecting people with the right genetic risk, you're increasing the chances dramatically that those individuals will have benefit. The second thing is more emphasis on self-antigen-based methods. Again, as Josh noted, using an autoantigen would have so many more benefits in terms of disease treatment than these agents that work forward. And so we're encouraged that JDRF is taking a look at these self-antigens and is continuing to support these areas in many ways. The other notion that we thought is that if there were ways that we could retreat people with the agents, and that would have potential benefit. Meaning, if you give a drug to a patient and they show progress, but then you begin to see signs of a weakening benefit, would that therapy that you gave them, would it be good to retreat them? And again, one of the advantages of using a drug like Diamyd and an antigen is we believe that retreatment will be safe. And actually, there was just a press release I saw this morning before coming into work where this was shown again with Diamyd. And again, there's good, as Ulf mentioned, there's now decades of safety data associated with Diamyd, where its track record has been stellar. The other thing is again, I mentioned a problem in the last slide is what a word called pragmatic, meaning is this really feasible and acceptable and easy? And I think that the protocol for Diamyd, where it's an in and out procedure and it's not so many times, that has benefits versus some of these other therapies that require continual treatment or long hospitalization stays. And again, just closing in, back again on that patient choice and autonomy. I think that the protocol with Diamyd does offer a considerable number of advantages to the patient and or the family that should be considered, and I think it will be seen as very favorable. So again, I'm very excited to where we are in the type 1 diabetes community, and I think that we're on the cusp of seeing a self-antigen, that being Diamyd, seeing use in terms of population to help those with type 1 diabetes. Thank you.
And if we move on and I address all three of you, saying patient access is an important question and central in making sure that novel treatments reach as many patients as possible. Can you describe the thinking here around Diamyd?
Yeah, and I can start off, and then probably Josh and Mark will probably have wise words to say about patient advocacy in general as well. But so patient advocacy, as I understand it, it's all about, or access, it's about really making sure that not only that you get an effective treatment to market. I mean, that's really a requirement. It needs to work. But obviously, then it works. Then it's a bit alluding to what Mark was saying as well. Is well, patient choice as well, and what's the side effect profile and what's the cost, which is guiding a lot of the access. And we as a company, I know many other companies in this field really have the vision that a long-term vision should be to cure the disease. But that means also that you don't only want to cure the individuals who happen to have a lot of money or have the right insurance companies, something like that, that you need to also think about that, which I think is important, that we want to be able to offer these kinds of treatment to as many patients as possible around the globe. It shouldn't only be an exclusive treatment that only a few lucky can access. So that's why it also comes back to a bit of this pragmatism of the treatment. That's one part. It should be pragmatic. Obviously, the cost benefit is very important when it comes to this. And obviously, the payers, the ones who pay for this, either insurance companies, if it's out of pocket, or in a more European healthcare societies, the taxpayers, that cost benefit equation needs to work out, because in the end, if it doesn't work out, it will not get accessed by everyone in the world. And we want to make sure that, I mean, otherwise our vision won't be able to come true in the end. If we can't have that on our roadmap, that how will this actually be accessed by everyone who is in need in the world. So that's really important for us as a company.
Josh, did you have any comment on this?
Not much I can add to what Ulf already said, but I can tell you that at JDRF, our approach is really kind of a holistic look, like I said, across the pipeline. So, the accessibility question is just as important as the research going on in the laboratory and the trials going on in the clinic. And we focus on this in a number of ways. We have our regulatory team that works to make sure that that access is available. We have to talk to payers to make sure that these are going to be affordable and are going to end up in the hands of patients. But really, there's two things that I think are most important here. The first being screening. We have to screen more people to find out who is at risk of type 1 diabetes in order to identify the patients that can benefit from these therapies that are being developed. We don't have, at least in the US, a nationwide automatic screening for type 1 diabetes yet. We need to do more to reach out and find the people that can benefit. And then the second part, it always comes back to education. And that's really a key point here. Once we have a drug approved, we need to educate the community about who it's appropriate for, who can benefit. We need to educate the clinicians to start using it in their clinics.
Did you want to add anything, Mark?
My co-presenters here are doing a great job of answering the questions, but all I'll add is one thing, just so it might not be confusing as much to the audience. We're really talking about two different populations here. Let's say in the new onset case, or individuals with recent onset disease. There's, again, studies dating back to decades that the longer that a person can produce their own insulin, or the longer that they can, better that they can manage their disease and keep their blood glucose levels low, the more likely they are to avoid disease-associated complications. And we don't speak as much about disease-associated complications these days, but again, diabetes in general remains a leading cause of blindness in adults. It's a major factor for kidney transplant. Almost 60% of people with type 1 diabetes die of cardiovascular disease, so you have a marked increased risk for that. So any therapy that can avoid these complications or help reduce the risk for them in a recent onset case is of promise and benefit. The second group that we've been mentioning and talking about screening is those at risk for the disease. And thanks in large part to the efforts of the JDRF and some others, there are now tests that can identify risk for diabetes development over short periods of time. And this has benefit in avoiding or helping reduce the chances of what we call diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA, which is a life-threatening situation. And again, it's key to note that almost 90% of individuals who develop type 1 diabetes have no family history of the disease. That's another misnomer, is that people think type 1 diabetes only occurs in certain families. But let me again repeat, 90% of the time it occurs in people without a family history. So screening affords the ability to know what symptoms to look for and watch out. And then the final thing I'll say on a therapy is, again, if you talk to families, we talk about advocacy. If you could delay the diabetes onset in a 5-year-old to, say, 10 years, or if you could delay diabetes in a teenager to adult, those patients and their family members would say that would mean all the world to them, to push the diagnosis as far away as possible, and maybe even prevent the disease from occurring at all. That's a big deal.
And to wrap this up then with one last point of discussion or question, we see significant activity in the type 1 diabetes field regarding advances in science, new approvals, as well as acquisitions and licensing deals. Why is this happening now, and what does this mean for the field as a whole and Diamyd specifically?
Yeah, I can start off, but but I will definitely hand over to Josh and Mark, so it's not only me speaking here. Obviously, as a company, for us, it's very important that there is like, let's say, commercial activity in the field, and also that the regulatory bodies like FDA and EMA on the US and who approve new therapies on the US and the European market, that things are happening, because in general, that's one of the main challenges or has been one of the main challenges in this field for many years, because if there's an unknown, you don't really know what the regulators can approve based on what kind of criteria. It obviously adds a major challenge. You want to know that this trial can actually lead to an approval if you hit the endpoints. The second thing is that the commercial thing. You want to know that if you get approval, that that it can actually go all the way to market and sell this. Because if you don't see the commercial opportunity, especially from the larger pharmaceutical companies, it's not enough to get approval. You need to be able to sell and then patients can get access to it. And what has been happening, especially this year, is that you've had both regulatory approvals and acquisitions and licensing deals, which is very important for the whole field, and especially for companies like us, because it reduces the risk for us, the development risk, when the commercial opportunity has been identified by larger players and the regulators start approving novel therapies in the field. So that's it's a great thing what's happening in the field right now.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to follow Ulf here?
Go ahead, Josh. Sure. All right. I'll just add one small thing. I'll say that there's a tendency to think about when you see an approval of another drug or things going on in the space that it's somehow restricting the market ability. And I think it's the exact opposite in the case of type 1 diabetes. We're at an exciting time, and these advances that other companies are making, that other investigators are making, are really paving the way for what Diamyd and others are trying to do. We know things from, as both I and Mark talked about earlier, that there's people that respond to certain therapies and not others. And we're going to have to identify which therapy is best for which patients. And that creates a very large market, right? And that creates a large opportunity. And if we can catalyze on the success of others and kind of lean into this exciting time, I think it's good for everybody.
Right, and all I'll add is, again, the one interesting thing here is that type 1 diabetes knows no geographic boundaries. And again, so whatever you're hearing about in the US or Europe, and even globally, different forms of study are taking a look at the disease and finding the global nature of it. So the impact of these efforts on screening and in disease therapy, they're not going to be restricted to one country, but they have the potential to provide benefit, again, at a global level.
Okay, so I think that will be it for today then. So thank you, Ulf, thank you, Josh and Mark, for participating. And we're all looking forward to all this progress within the type 1 diabetes field. And thank you for watching.